You water the bed in the morning. By afternoon, the soil is powder. The leaves curl. You water again at dusk. By the next sunrise, it is the exact same thing. Dry, cracked, dying slowly in front of you. You think you forgot something. You think you need a drip system, a timer, a better hose, something you can buy. Something that costs money you already spent, on seeds that barely germinated in that concrete hard ground. But here is what nobody told you. You're not failing. At gardening, you're trapped inside a watering cycle that was designed to never end. 60% of the water you pour onto an exposed bed evaporates before a single root hair even touches it. 60% gone into hot air. You're filling a container with no bottom and blaming yourself for the emptiness. And it gets worse. There is a second mechanism working against you, a mechanism that almost no grower ever considers. When that surface dries out, it creates a tension gradient, a pull dragging the moisture sitting safely in the deeper layers. The moisture your plants actually need gets dragged upward toward the dry crust, toward the sun, toward absolutely nothing. The same physics that makes a paper towel wick liquid from a puddle is actively stealing water from your plant roots and handing it to the atmosphere. So the drier the top becomes, the faster the bottom empties. An uncovered bed in summer loses all usable moisture from the top 30 centimeters in 2 days, sometimes 3. Then you water again, then it vanishes again. The cycle repeats Monday, Wednesday, Friday, every single week with no end. This isn't a watering problem. This is a structural failure. The bed itself is broken, and not because you built it. Wrong, because the system you inherited, the bare soil, hose-dependent model, was never actually designed to hold water. It was designed to sell you more. Water more time, more products, more dependency. Farmers 3 generations back knew this. They had a method that cost nothing, required no installation, no plastic bottles, no pumps, no purchased inputs. Their beds went weeks without irrigation, and the plants stayed open, green, producing. Then cheap garden hoses flooded the market, and that knowledge quietly disappeared beneath convenience. The trick still works, but before you can use it, you need to see exactly what is happening beneath that exposed surface, because the solution only makes sense once the physics of the failure is visible. Here is the thing. Nobody told you that daily watering habit isn't a flaw. It is a designed dependency. Somebody sold you bare soil. Somebody sold you bags of sterilized potting mix with zero fungal life. Somebody told you to till the bed every season, flip the earth, break it open, and then somebody sold you a hose, timer, a drip system, to fix the problem that tilling created in the very first place. The cycle isn't accidental, it is a business model. Every time you rototill a garden bed, you shred the fungal network that holds moisture tightly between soil particles, those white threads you see when you dig. That is the infrastructure, that is the plumbing. Destroy it, and the soil becomes powder. Within hours, the water has nothing to cling to, it rises, it evaporates, it vanishes. 60% gone before a single root takes a drink. So you water again and again, and the company that sold you the tiller now sells you the fancy irrigation kit. Herbicides do the exact same thing from a different angle. They don't just kill weeds, they sterilize the top layer of biology. The bacteria that glue soil aggregates together. The fungi that transport water. Gone. What remains is dead mineral dust that heats up under direct sun and literally bakes itself into a crust. A bed exposed to full radiation can lose its entire water reserve in a single afternoon, not because you forgot to water, because the living system that once held that water was chemically erased. And the so-called nutrient soils you buy in bags, sterilized, pasteurized, biologically empty. They hold water for a week, maybe 2. Then collapse into hydrophobic blocks that repel the moisture you pour on them. You paid for convenience. What you got was a sterile substrate, a substrate with no immune system, no structure, no future. Meanwhile, the solution that actually works costs absolutely nothing. Dead leaves on the surface, straw, cardboard, 8 to 12 centimeters of any dry organic material placed on moist ground. Blocks solar radiation entirely. Evaporation drops to near zero. The soil stays cool, stays wet, stays alive. A bed that demanded daily watering now holds for 5 to 7 days. No product required, no subscription, no repeat purchase. That is why you never heard about it at the garden center. There is no profit margin in fallen leaves. There is no upsell on straw from your neighbor's field. The entire agrochemical model depends on you never discovering this. That a free layer of dead matter outperforms every product on the shelf. But blocking evaporation is only half the mechanism. The real shift happens underneath, in the biology that rebuilds itself. It rebuilds itself once you finally stop destroying it. 30 days without a single drop of water, the leaves still open, the stem still rigid, the fruit still forming. Not because of some expensive drip system buried underground, because of a law that every forest floor has obeyed for 300 million years, and that your bare garden bed violates every single day. Here is the law. Soil was never meant to be naked. In nature, no healthy ground sits exposed to the sun. There is always a layer between the atmosphere and the living earth. Fallen leaves, dead grass, bark, fragments, a skin of organic debris that does two things simultaneously. It blocks the sun from pulling moisture upward through evaporation, and it blocks capillary action, that invisible wick effect, where water climbs through tiny soil pores toward the hot surface and completely vanishes into the air. Remove that skin, and you've created an open wound. The soil bleeds water in both directions at once, downward past the roots and upward into nothing. That is why your bed dries in hours, not because you water wrong, because the surface is exposed, and exposed soil is dying soil. Now here is where the mechanism gets interesting. When you lay dead organic matter back over wet ground, you're not just shading the dirt, you're restarting a decomposition cycle. The bottom of that layer begins to break apart. Microorganisms move in, and fungi thread right through it. Those organisms glue soil particles together into tiny aggregates, tiny crumb structures that hold water the way a sponge does. The cover feeds the biology, and the biology restructures the soil to hold even more moisture. Compounds. Week after week, the soil beneath that barrier becomes darker, spongier, more alive. One man described watering twice a day and still finding his plants wilted. He laid down a layer of crushed dry leaves over soaked ground. Within a week, he stopped worrying. Within a month, he stopped checking. But the sequence matters. Lay that barrier over dry ground. You seal in drought. The same physics that traps moisture also traps dryness. You must flood the bed. First, soak it until the surface glistens, then cover it, then walk away. The barrier locks that water inside. The biology beneath begins converting dead material into living structure: straw, shredded leaves, cardboard, wood chips. Each one decomposes at a different speed, feeds different organisms, lasts a different number of months, but every single one obeys the same forgotten law. Cover wet ground with dead matter, and the soil stops losing what you gave it. This is not a gardening trick, this is the operating system that ran beneath every meadow and forest canopy before concrete and bare-tilled rows replaced it, and restoring it costs nothing except the willingness to stop fighting the surface and start feeding what lives below it. 6 months in, no watering schedule, no drip lines, no timers. The soil underneath is black, cool to the touch, and holds moisture like a sponge 3 days after the last rain. The plants aren't struggling, they aren't wilting at noon, they're producing. And the only thing that changed was one afternoon of doing almost nothing. Here is the lever. You take dead material already lying around your property, dried grass clippings from the neighbor's curb, fallen leaves piling against the fence, cardboard from last week's deliveries, and you lay it over wet soil, 8 to 12 centimeters thick. That is it. No digging, no mixing, no turning. You place it on top and you walk away. What happens next is the part that breaks people's assumptions. The cover blocks direct sunlight from hitting bare earth. Surface evaporation stops. The process that was stealing 60% of every watering, stealing 60% of it before the roots could even drink. Capillary pull, the invisible wick drawing deep moisture upward into dry air, gets interrupted. 2 drainage pathways sealed shut by a layer of material. Material you would have otherwise thrown right in the trash. One grower described it plainly. He watered every morning. By afternoon, the soil was powder, and the plants were collapsing. He laid cover material once, now he sleeps, without setting alarms, and leaves for work without thinking about irrigation. The soil holds, The roots find what they need on their own schedule, but the lever doesn't stop at moisture underneath that blanket. Fungi begin threading. Through the decomposing fibers, bacteria colonies explode in the dark, humid gap. Between cover and earth, earthworms migrate upward. A food web assembles itself. In silence, converting dead leaves into plant-available nutrients. Without a single bag of fertilizer purchased, you did one thing. You stopped exposing the surface, and an entire underground economy woke up and went to work, if dried. Grass is what you have. Let it cure in the sun first. Fresh green layers compact into a waterproof seal, the opposite of what you want. Thin applications, 2 centimeters at most when green, or wait until it is brown and brittle, then pile it on. Cardboard works the same way. Overlap the edges. Wet it down. Forget about it. Now add one more layer of laziness. Low-growing plants along the edges. Thyme, nasturtium, strawberries. They shade the remaining gaps, trap humidity around their own roots, and produce food while doing it. The center, covered in dead material. The borders covered in living material. Together they build a microclimate so stable that temperature swings flatten. Moisture loss drops to almost nothing, and the bed starts behaving less like a garden and more like a forest floor. Less intervention, more output. The system was always capable of running itself. It just needed you to stop stripping it bare every season. Now picture a different morning, not yours, someone else's. The grocery store shelves are half empty. Lettuce costs what steak used to. A neighbor drives to 3 different shops, looking for tomatoes that aren't bruised or rotting. She finds none, comes home frustrated, opens a can of something processed, feeds it to her kids, and calls it dinner. You walk to your backyard. The soil is dark, cool, alive. You pull kale that nobody sold you. You cut herbs that no truck delivered. You harvest food that exists because 6 months ago, you stopped believing the system would always provide. This isn't gardening. Gardening is just a weekend hobby. This is something else entirely. This is a decision about who feeds your family when the chain breaks. And the chain always breaks. Fuel prices spike. A drought hits the wrong region. A port shuts down. For 2 weeks, suddenly, the produce aisle looks like a picked-over carcass. Everyone remembers that food doesn't come from stores. It comes from soil that someone somewhere had to tend. The question is whether that someone is you, or whether you're standing in line hoping it is someone else's problem. What you built with straw and patience and buried bottles isn't a garden bed. It is a quiet insurance policy, one that doesn't require monthly payments, one that appreciates in value every single season. The soil gets richer, the biology gets denser, the yields climb, while everything else in your life depreciates. This system compounds. No corporation will advertise this to you. No subscription box will deliver it. And absolutely no app will remind you to do it. Because the moment you understand that a few centimeters of dead cover and a functioning soil food web can feed you indefinitely, you stop being a consumer. You become something the supply chain cannot account for, someone who doesn't need it. That is the real output here, not tomatoes, not savings on your water bill. Sovereignty, the kind you can hold in your hand, wash under a tap, and eat while the world outside argues about prices, shortages, and who is to blame. Other people will panic. You'll walk outside, barefoot, and bring breakfast back in. That is not a fantasy. That is a system you already know how to build.